Hello, welcome back to the Syndicate. My name is Lakshman, and I'm joined with.
Hey everyone, I'm Benjamin.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Syndicate. Well, it's been quite a while. We've been on quite a hiatus for a couple of weeks, but we're back, and we've got tons and tons of news to cover, as well as a couple of pretty interesting discussions that we're going to get on with later today. So, without further ado, Ben, I think we should jump straight into the news. So, I think the best place to begin is with what's going on with Samsung. So Samsung had a really big week last week. Samsung's Unpacked event, their annual Galaxy event happened. And this time we've got a bunch of products released by Samsung. A bunch of products that we already were expecting, but this time we got to see them all in person. So we've got devices like the Note 20, the Note 20 Ultra, the Galaxy Z Fold, as well as a new pair of headphones called Galaxy Buds Life, a new watch, a Galaxy Watch, and a new tablet. Can you believe it? Samsung's still making tablets. So, based on all of the devices unveiled by Samsung, I gotta ask you, Ben, because you're the Android guy here, what has gotten you the most excited for?
Well, it's got to be the Z Fold 2. This might actually come as a surprise to a lot of people, but let me try to explain it the best way I can. As you and I know, Lax, phone sizes have been getting bigger and bigger and bigger as time goes on. And it's getting to a point now where it's pretty unwieldy. I mean, the Note 20 Ultra is like, 6.9 inches? That's ridiculously huge, you know. I'm using a Samsung Galaxy S10. And the screen size is about 6.1 inches. And even then, it's starting to get a little unwieldy. And I have relatively large hands. So I can't really say I particularly like having larger and larger phones. And so the Z Fold, even the first generation Fold, it presented us with this, well, it's not necessarily a new idea, but the concept that you can have both a smaller size screen and a larger size screen in the same device. And that's very compelling because most of the time, you know, if you're just scrolling through messages, if you just want to do a bit of browsing on the internet, Reddit, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, you know, the small screen is actually good enough. And it's one-handable. You don't have to worry about too much. But when you want to, let's say, consume media, when you want to do things which require a larger screen, multitasking and the lot, it's a lot nicer to have a larger screen. And that's why the Note line has been really, really popular. But it's getting to a point where I think so it's pretty unwieldy to use. It's pretty big, it's pretty chunky, you know, the Note lineup. Even the S20 lineup, it's pretty big. So I think the Galaxy Z Fold is the phone for me. Sadly, I can't really afford it. It's about the same price as last year's model, and in Malaysia it retailed for about almost 9,000 ringgit. So as much as I do want to buy the phone, it's a bit out of my price range, but that is definitely the phone that I'm most interested in.
Well, that's definitely an interesting observation. Because for me, I think you and I have been having this discussion for quite a while. I've been on the fence on foldables for quite some time now. I do enjoy the idea of the foldable. It's definitely an interesting concept, and with what we've been seeing with foldables over the past year, with Samsung's Fold and with Motorola's and Razer and Huawei, a bunch of other manufacturers, the concept is interesting. But I think in terms of the execution, it's not there yet. And if you look at Samsung's latest offering, the Z Fold 2, it's got a new name now. So I think from a practical standpoint, Samsung is the only manufacturer out of all the other manufacturers that have somewhat gotten the foldable idea almost right. Like the Z Fold 2 is almost there. It's not perfect. It's not. But it's the best one out of the bunch because Samsung took a lot of the complaints from the first generation and just got rid of all of them. Like this time, they got rid of the notch, and they gave us a continuous bezel-less display And on the front, when you close the device, they gave it a much larger, more expansive display in the front. So I think it makes for one-handed usability, and when it's folded, it makes the overall experience a lot more compelling, in my opinion. But in regards to the Note 20 and the Note 20 Ultra, so I was lucky enough to actually get my hands on the Note 20 devices a few days ago. And upon first glance, again, beautiful screens. Samsung makes some of the best panels in the industry. But I'm going to have to agree with you on size. These phones are massive. And I have pretty small hands, and they just seem so unwieldy to me. And not to mention the ginormous camera bump. I think it's the largest protrusion I've seen on any mobile device. With all that, said, there are people who, they are diehard fans of the Note lineup. They will love this device because it's got such an expansive canvas. But I think from a practicality standpoint, it's not there yet. But Samsung is also committed to providing at least 3 years of support, of Android support for these devices. So that's an interesting idea that we'll explore later on. But generally, the Note line, it's an iteration from what Note devices have been over from the past couple of years. It's a great device. Note fans of the Note will love it. But in terms of the Z Fold, great concept. Just it's not quite there yet. Pricing is a massive turnoff for lots of people. But I think as the years go on, foldables are going to get a lot more interesting. So generally, I think Samsung really stepped up their game here in terms of the foldables. But Ben, I think we have to address one device, the standard Galaxy Note 20. That thing's made of plastic, Ben. You're paying $1,000 for a plastic phone. What's your take?
Well, yeah, actually, we were talking about this the other day, didn't we? Now, I have a Nokia N9 somewhere in my room, and the Nokia N9 also uses a polycarbonate material finish. Well, the chassis is made of polycarbonate, and yes, polycarbonate does feel like plastic. You can make it work. You can make it feel somewhat premium. But I agree with you. For $1,000, you can't really sell to people a plastic phone. I mean, that's what polycarbonate phones are. And so I think it's a bit sad that Samsung has priced this device so expensive, such well, at $1,000, and yet the materials are lackluster. It makes the OnePlus Nord, which we're going to discuss later on, by the way, it makes the OnePlus Nord such a compelling device, and that's made of plastic. Well, actually, it's not made of plastic. The casing, the outer rim is made of plastic, but the front and back are made of glass. And the other thing that I pointed out to you before the podcast, I think a few days ago, if the rumors are right, Apple will have a much better pricing on their phones than Samsung has this year. I think it goes to show that I think Samsung, to quite an extent, has bungled up their lineup. Again, which is a bit unfortunate. But then again, I don't exactly use or like Samsung. Yes, I'm using the S10, but that was the only compelling phone that I think Samsung has made, something that I'd buy. None of the phones this year had the same sort of compelling element other than the Z Fold 2. Yeah, so where the Note 20 is concerned, yes, the processor is the highest end processor. It has 8 gigabytes of RAM, which I believe is more than enough for most people. The screen is, of course, as fantastic as ever, but it's those slight differences that really push the Note 20 down from where it actually should be. The Note lineup is supposed to be the ultra premium flagship line from Samsung. It's supposed to be the phone that if you hold it in your hand, it should be wow. It should give you that wow factor. And the Note 20 line the Note 20 specifically didn't do that. The Note 20 Ultra is really pretty device. But I think if you compare it next to the Note 20, we take the Note 20. Unfortunately, it's simply not as compelling as it used to be, which is really sad. The Note 10 was really nice, but not the Note 20. So what do you think, Lakshman?
I agree with you on a lot of things. In fact, I'm gonna go on the line here and say this. I think last year's Note 10 is still a better purchase decision than the standard Note 20. I mean, think about it. Last year's Note 10, it's got a glass back. It feels more premium. This year's Note 20, at least the standard Note 20, it's just not compelling enough to fork out $1,000 for a phone it just doesn't feel as premium. And in fact, getting my hands on both the devices, the Note 20 Ultra, it hits all the right marks. But the standard Note 20, I feel like Samsung they really cheaped out here. In fact, there is no reason, in my opinion, for people to spend as much. I think for those of you who are looking to get a standard Note 20 and not the Note 20 Ultra, I think you're better off looking elsewhere or getting last year's Note 10 or Note 10 Plus, because it's not worth spending $1,000 for a plastic device. Polycarbonate, whatever you call it, it's still plastic at the end of the day, and that really doesn't justify you paying the premium. So generally, that's it. Those are the biggest offerings from Samsung. Also, we've got the new Galaxy Beans. Oh, I'm sorry. I mean Galaxy Buds Life, who actually look like little tiny beans. Ben, do you agree?
Well, yeah, it actually does look like little beans. I forgot who mentioned it, but as a tech YouTuber mentioned, they really did miss the opportunity to call it the Galaxy Beans. There really wouldn't be any problem with them calling them that. I think where noise cancellation devices goes, I think it's pretty good. For the price, it's $130, which if you're in Malaysia translates to around 700 ringgit. That's a really good price for a noise cancelling pair of noise cancelling earphones. Wireless earphones at that. No, it actually won't give you the same sort of impact as, say, the AirPods Pro. But then you're comparing a 700 ringgit device with a thousand ringgit device, or rather 1,100 ringgit device. So I do think, in that sense, with this unique design, and it does seem to fit well in the ears. Actually, I don't know. It's pretty compelling. I might end up buying it. Although that being said, I'm still not really into the whole wireless earbuds thing. I think they're still not good enough. I think still wired earphones are the way to go. But hopefully in the next year or two, Samsung might, or even Apple, whomever actually, they might be able to come up with a decent offering. But for the time being, if you're broke, well, somewhat broke, and you really want to get a pair of wireless earbuds, I think this is a really good choice for a lot of people. It's at a good price. It's competitive. It's unique if you want to stand out. So yes, quite fascinating offering by Samsung actually. Yeah. So Lex, have you seen the device for yourself in person?
No, I've not gotten a chance to check out those Galaxy Beans. I'm gonna call them Beans, Ben. I'm just gonna stick with that. I've not checked out the device in person yet, but they do seem to be quite a compelling offering from Samsung. So I think with this unique design, it will really catapult these devices, because it'll gain more attention. And just like how AirPods is a runaway success because of its odd-looking design, I think the same thing could happen over here, and this could be one of the best offerings on the Android side of things. Anyways, other than that, well, we've got the Galaxy Watch 3, which, to be honest, at this point, Android Wear it's lost to the Apple Watch. It's just it doesn't make sense to purchase an Android Wear device. But it is a solid smartwatch for if you like Samsung's offering. If you like smartwatches that run Tizen, then by all means go ahead. but it's not for everyone. And then we've also got the new Galaxy Tab S7, if I'm not mistaken, that's what it's called. And that's just an iPad Pro ripoff to me, but what do you think, Ben?
Well, on the Galaxy Watch first. Well, I guess it's fine. You know, if you like smartwatches, you like smartwatches. If you're using an Android, this might be the best one you could get. I wouldn't necessarily call it the best looking smartwatch on the market. I think the Moto 360 still has that honor, but good for you. For any of you who actually like smartwatches. I don't. I never found a good reason to use or buy them. But if you do, or if you're in the Samsung ecosystem, if you've used a Galaxy Watch before, hey, this is something great for you to use. With the Samsung Tab S7, um, I'm not sure because I'm not really into Android tablets as well. Well, in general, I'm not into tablets. iPad, whether it runs iPad OS or whether it runs some version of Android, not necessarily a fan of them. But I think with what Samsung has done, they've tried to build a sort of PC experience around it with Android and their version of what an Android a desktop version should be. I'm not exactly sure in what way people can use it because it's not like iPad OS where there's a different workflow. You can tell, it's not for everyone. It's definitely not, but there is something there for a certain kind of person. If you are a student, if you are a designer, the iPad Pro, the workflow that the iPad Pro gives you, it's really something to consider. But with the Tab S7, I'm not very sure because Android simply doesn't have the sort of benefits that a tightly integrated system does, like the Apple ecosystem. So for the time being, I think it's going to be very similar to what Chromecast is like, and what previous Android tablets have been like. It might be a better experience. It seems really smooth, I'll say, based on what I've seen so far. But in terms of Samsung trying to push this device to, in a way, compete with the iPad Pro or to compete with the laptop segment in general, I can't say where they'll go. I think it's interesting, but for someone like myself, well, I'm a power user. I need a PC. I need to be able to do work because my workflow is very versatile. So for something like that, for someone like me, it's not really worth it. But for any of you who out there who are, say, students, or if your workflow does not really require something so intensive, and if you're not necessarily into the whole Apple ecosystem, this is a very good platform. It's a very good device for you to get into. How about you, Lex? What would you consider the Tab S7 in your life?
Never in a million years. But generally, but I think in terms of the Android side, if you look at tablets on the Android end, there really isn't a compelling offering, and this Tab S7 is the closest you'll ever get to an Android tablet. Because right now, at least for me, I really cannot think of any other Android device that's centered around a tablet experience that's still a thing in the market, except for the Galaxy Tabs. And they try to emulate the iPad Pro in a lot of ways, but that's a good thing because it's bringing some of those features to the Android ecosystem. How well they'll do is again, I don't know. These things don't sell that well, but it's the best, most compelling offering for a tablet on the Android side of things. But still, if you want a good tablet, generally you're better off spending money on a cheaper iPad than this device. Although if you're in the Samsung ecosystem, then by all means, this is an interesting offering. So generally, the Unpacked event was a lot of interesting stuff was revealed, but it's nothing that blew our minds because pretty much like all Samsung events, everything was leaked to hell before the event. But overall, again, I'm most excited for the Galaxy Z Fold 2. That device seemed to have a lot of potential. The Note 20 Ultra it's an interesting device. It's cool. The standard Note 20 is just a really bad offering. The Galaxy Buds are interesting. The Galaxy Watch is, yeah, sure, whatever, and the Tab S7 is it's a good Android tablet. So that's about it for Samsung's thing last week. But over the past month, we've been getting lots and lots, especially over the past couple of weeks, so many offerings, so many new devices. In particular with OnePlus. So OnePlus made headlines for the past couple of weeks with the introduction of the brand new OnePlus Nord. Now, this device was what OnePlus was saying is them going back to the roots. Although that isn't necessarily true, it's not a flagship killer per se. It is a very, very compelling offering. Actually, in my opinion, the most compelling offering from the Android side of things. So Ben, what do you think, Ben? What's your take on the OnePlus Nord?
Well, okay, I might have a slightly different perspective than most people do. That includes the tech reviewers, or even for yourself. And I say this because I used to own the OnePlus X. So for those of you who didn't know, the year that OnePlus released the OnePlus 2, alongside it, they released a sort of budget offering. This wasn't a flagship killer. It really was a budget offering at $250 for about 1,000 ringgit or so. They introduced the OnePlus X, which essentially used the internals from the OnePlus 1, but actually slightly better. So it had a glass sandwich design. It actually looked a lot like the iPhone 4, actually, in quite a few ways. It also had an AMOLED screen. I remember the day I actually showed Lakshman. It was quite a few years ago. He was awestruck by it. He could not believe that I actually got something like that. Now, I really like the OnePlus X, and sadly, I sort of buggered up its display, so it's just sitting there. I might have to get that repaired soon. But in any case, when I look at the OnePlus Nord, a lot of people like to make comparisons with that and the OnePlus X, and I think that's not right. Because if the OnePlus Nord really is going to be something like the OnePlus X, you'd expect a Snapdragon 855 processor, and you wouldn't find as much, say, cutbacks. You wouldn't find some cost-saving measures in a lot of respects. I think OnePlus did try to make a device which was appealing to as many people as possible. But I think for me, the OnePlus Nord is not really that exciting. If you wanted to buy, a decent phone, you wanted it to be relatively clean, but you wanted it to also be competent. You want it to be powerful and smooth in some regards. Then sure, it's the phone for you. But I can't seem to particularly enjoy the OnePlus Nord. For me, I've never associated OnePlus with plastic. Never. I've never associated OnePlus with plastic until this phone. Now remember, remember what I've said. The OnePlus X had a glass sandwich design, which means the frame, the core of the support of the device was made of aluminium. So even with a budget offering at $250, not once did OnePlus actually use plastic, or at least if they did, it's not a time I can remember. Maybe the OnePlus One, but I don't recall. So it's a bit for me, it's sort of bittersweet. I can't help but, how do I put it? I can't help but dislike the OnePlus Nord, actually. But at the same time, I can't help but think, well, at least now there's a budget offering for a lot of people. But for me, I don't think it's enough, especially not beside the iPhone SE. The iPhone SE, even though it has a dated design, it's still a premium feeling phone. By and large, it has a better processor. It does have objectively a better camera. It doesn't have a better display. The display is pretty bad on the OnePlus SE. Sorry, on the my bad, not OnePlus. The iPhone SE. But that's it. There are very few things that are wrong with the iPhone SE compared to the OnePlus Nord. So I think in that regard, it's hard to say which one I'd choose. Actually, I wouldn't choose either if I had to choose one at all. But there's something about the OnePlus Nord that just doesn't interest me. It doesn't interest me as I thought I would be. The OnePlus really did overhype the launch of this phone. And I think a lot of other tech reviewers, tech YouTubers did as well. And I must say, it's not really that impressive. It's a good phone, don't get me wrong. It's a competent phone. It'll do you well, but it's not that great. It's not OnePlus returning to their roots. It's OnePlus evolving and catering to catering to more people than ever before. And so this is the result for them trying to create a new budget offering. Lex, what are your views on this?
Listening to you, talk about the OnePlus Nord, it's given me a lot of perspective because this is coming from an Android user. People, bear in mind you've been an Android user since the beginning, and if you think the OnePlus Nord is not as a compelling device as other offerings out there, and even you went to the extent of comparing it to the iPhone SE, I have to say that's quite an interesting take because it's not a take that most people tend to agree upon. I don't agree with you entirely, but there are certain aspects that I do agree with you on. For instance, this is not OnePlus going back to the roots. As much as as all the marketing has pointed out, this is not OnePlus. This is not the old OnePlus we know and love. Because if this was the old OnePlus, this will be a device that would have a much better processor and it would essentially be placed as the flagship killer. But OnePlus cannot do that. Because you know why? Today, OnePlus is no longer a flagship killer brand. They essentially make flagship devices. So I agree with you that this is a sign that OnePlus is evolving, expanding the range of devices, but it's not OnePlus going back to the roots. But for me, as a lifelong iOS user, I think we've discussed this before. This is the most compelling offering on the Android side of things. I have never wanted to own an Android more than a OnePlus Nord, because it's got, for me at least, it's gotten a lot of the things right. It's got a great display. It's got a decent size. It's got a enjoyable design. It runs, a fantastic version of Android. Oxygen OS is still one of the best versions of Android out there, period. And on top of that, it's just priced right. It's not really expensive. It's just perfect, So I think this will attract a lot of people who are looking to get a new phone, but don't want to spend as much. I think a lot of people would be quite happy with the OnePlus Nord, but it's not for everybody, as you've mentioned. It's not something professionals would use. It's something I think people will enjoy, but it's not for everyone. So with that in mind, I think we're at a crossroads with OnePlus here. So we're going to get into all the details later on and during the discussion. But it's definitely an interesting time for OnePlus. But over on the Google side of things, we've also got some news. So the Google Pixel 4a was released about a week ago. And, I don't know, Ben. It's my feelings are kind of a mixed bag on the Google Pixel 4a. So what's your take?
Oh, well, my opinions on the Pixel 4a is actually very similar to the Nord. Yes, I mean, the Pixel 4 is priced a lot more aggressively than the Nord is at about $350 US. But I think it's a little too late for Google, unfortunately. With their A lineup, I think Google had a very clear direction, but it's been distracted by their attempts to make a flagship phone work. I mean, think about it. The Pixel 4a is a better looking phone than the Pixel 4, and the Pixel 4 is a flagship device. This is how badly Google has screw things over for themselves actually. But strictly speaking, on the 4a, it's a Pixel device, so it's gonna have a fantastic camera, no doubt. It's gonna shoot amazing stills. Video wise, I don't think Google's there yet. For whatever reason, it's really odd that they managed to get photography right, but videography not really quite there yet. Apple is still king in that regard. But I would say that most people take photos rather than videos. So for that kind of crowd, the Pixel 4a is actually pretty good. It is again, like I mentioned, it's the best looking Pixel device. So it's basically like my S10. It has a punch hole design, clean look, very good looking. Yes, it's still made of plastic, but I think that's okay. It's for a budget phone for $350. I suppose it's to be expected. But everything else about the phone is, well, basic. It's a Pixel phone. Now, while a lot of people like stock Android, I'm not actually one of those people. I've actually moved away from that position. I prefer something like what OnePlus is doing or what Motorola is doing. It's stock Android with a bit of a sprinkling of features here and there. So, is this the one for you? Well, if you're from Malaysia, tough luck. The Pixel 4a is probably not going to come here. If, for whatever reason, we have someone from North America listening to us, this might be a better deal than the OnePlus Nord, because at the very least, you get a good camera with the Pixel 4a, if that's what you're into. But if you're into user experience, about smoothness, about a high refresh rate, if you like those kinds of things, then yeah, you might as well go for the OnePlus Nord. They're both pretty good, compelling devices, but with the Pixel 4a, I don't know. I think Google's lost me. I might never consider a Pixel lineup as good as their cameras are. It's just an ordinary device. It has almost the same specifications as the OnePlus Nord, just with a better camera.
I have to agree with you. And in fact, I was telling you this yesterday, and I'm going to tell our listeners this. I think I was jokingly telling Ben this yesterday. The Pixel 4a is the phone made for Benjamin, because you know why? It comes in black as the only color, and it has a headphone jack in 2020. But generally, I think the Pixel 4a it's a phone that's trying to position itself as one thing, but its execution is not quite there yet. Since the primary target of this phone is the India market, so I think it'll do pretty well over there. But generally, over in North America, it's not, in my opinion, a good budget offering. And as a result of the Pixel 4a, it's really confused the Pixel lineup in general, because devices like the Pixel 4 and the 4 XL, flagship Google devices, have been canceled. Google recently canceled both the Pixel 4 and Pixel 4a. Pixel 4 XL. So this goes to show that Google they still don't know what they're doing. And as compelling as the cameras are, and they do take fantastic photos, as an all-around device, a camera does not make or break someone's purchasing decision. As much as we tend to think our lives in the mobile world revolve around the cameras, it really doesn't come down to that. At the end of the day, it comes down to reliability, stability, performance, build quality. These things matter. And I don't know, I think the Pixel 4 is just, it's not going to be a runaway success. It's cannibalized the flagship lineup for the Pixel devices. And who knows, now with the Pixel 5 also coming out this fall, later this year, who knows where that will go. But for the most part, I personally don't think that the Pixel 4a is a compelling buy. For those of you in the North American market, um, if you're looking at Android devices, I think you're better off looking elsewhere to like Samsung or something, because the 4a it's just not quite there yet. It's sad because the OnePlus Nord is a better offering than the Pixel 4 in my opinion, but that's not available in the North American market. All right, so next up, Ben, that's it for Android. Even Apple decided to drop something out of the blue over the past couple of days. So Apple recently unveiled a brand new 27-inch iMac, but it's not the iMac you're thinking about. This is not the brand new redesigned iMac with Apple Silicon. This is in fact the same boring iMac with the same design, but with some pretty interesting tweaks here and there. So what's your take on the iMac, Ben?
My take on the iMac has been my take for quite a while. I think Apple can just start getting rid of the iMacs. I've not found the iMac compelling, and the reason why it's not compelling anymore is because, well, their MacBooks are doing really well. It has, a better screen. The keyboard's packed along with it. It's portable. I suppose you could make the same arguments for Windows PCs and Windows laptops. But I think with the iMac in particular, it's really being suffocated by the Mac, number one, and number two, and perhaps more importantly, the iPads. I think those two things are that are suffocating the iMac. And it needs a new it needs a new lease on life if it shouldn't go away. And the issue with this current refresh, and it is a refresh, it's not a completely new iMac, it's just a refresh. It's that it's stale, it's boring, and it uses an Intel CPU. There's nothing wrong with Intel CPUs, but it's just that in the current market, if you want your customers to get a relatively powerful device at a relatively low cost, you give them an AMD CPU. But of course, with Apple, you can't really expect that. But when you look at the specifications, particularly on the processing side for the iMacs, it's just a small upgrade, by and large, that's what it is. Design wise on the iMac, those bezels are Christ on a bike. They're huge. My God. This is one of the reasons why I said, the iMac can just go away. I'm surprised that Apple has actually decided to keep the iMacs as they are. I'm surprised that Johnny Ive, when he was in Apple, he didn't bother just get rid of the iMacs entirely. Those bezels didn't belong on the Apple lineup since 2017, let alone 2020. But of course, I suppose with Apple, they just wanted to perhaps they had some sort of contractual obligations. Perhaps they simply wanted to provide their customers with just one last hurrah for the Intel iMac. Something that people are comfortable with, something that people want to upgrade to, but they don't necessarily want a new design. They don't necessarily want or desire the Apple Silicon. So that's something they're looking for. I suppose the most notable upgrade to me is that for the first time in their lineup for many, many years, Apple has finally decided to put a 1080p camera into the iMac. The MacBooks didn't get that, the older iMacs didn't get that, but they did on this model. So congratulations to Apple for finally putting in a slightly better camera. Lax, I'm sure you have your thoughts on this as well as someone who has multiple iMacs at home. What are your thoughts?
Right. So regarding the iMac, well, I think the iMac it's not as easy to just dismiss devices like the iMac as you may think, because I think for the iMac, Apple's on this mindset whereby it goes like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So the iMac has been a proven concept for years. It has been the default go-to all-in-one since the beginning. It actually pioneered that. But in terms of the latest lineup of iMacs that we've gotten for the past 10 years, there hasn't been a significant push, a significant design refresh. And I think as a result of that, it's made desktops and iMacs in general not become a default purchase for most people, because we live in a very mobile world. Everyone's on the go. But as compared to 10 years ago, where you would know of multiple people that have a desktop at home, today that's not quite the case. Everyone has a laptop nowadays, or a tablet. The desktop industry on its own has been on the decline, and I think the iMac has been one of the only devices that still remained the go-to choice for desktops for the most part. But its design is stale, and I agree with you. Those bezels just don't belong there in 2020. But this is a last hoo-ha for the iMac, for the Intel-based iMac, because we know that there's going to be an inevitable iMac refresh with Apple Silicon chips sometime next year. So with that refresh just looming on the horizon, it begs the question: is this iMac a good purchasing decision for most people? And I'm just going to go out on the limb and say it's not. If you're looking to buy a desktop, if you care about things like design and you want something to last you for a long time, this isn't the device for you. It's best to wait out a year and get that brand new iMac, which is going to be leaps and bounds better than this one. But is it a bad computer? No, it's not. It is a fantastic computer. It's just made compromises in the wrong spots. Design is one of them. But generally, it's still a very, very good computer. And in terms of the webcam, yep, finally, Apple's included Apple's gotten rid of their potato cam, with their 480p potato cameras, and replaced it with a brand new 1080p camera. And this is again a much heavily requested change. I hope to God they bring this to all their Macs moving forwards, because I think it's what we need most, especially nowadays since we're all quarantined for the most part. So yeah, the iMac is an interesting device. Oh, another thing that makes this iMac somewhat of an interesting device is the fact that Apple's included a new nano texture display. It's nano texture coating on the display, and that's the same coating found on the Pro Display XDR. So now, instead of dropping $6,000 on a Pro Display, you can get that nano texture on an iMac, which is a lot cheaper than that. But interesting updates. In a way, I think this iMac foreshadows what future Macs will have, like that nano texture display and better webcams. But it's not quite there yet. And as much as I love Apple, I just can't recommend this device to most people out there. So yeah, that's about it with the news. So Ben, shall we dive into the discussions?
Oh yeah, let's go ahead. So what we're about to discuss today is a little odd. You will hear a lot of pessimism. If you haven't already noticed it, you will notice a lot of pessimism. But the discussion will be on the sort of these rise of the premium mid-rangers. Well, not necessarily the rise, I suppose, but the bigger attention given to the premium mid-rangers. And so for me, I think there are three notable contenders. The three phones that really hyped up the premium mid-range segment across the world. That's the iPhone SE, the OnePlus Nord, and the Google Pixel 4a. So I personally don't understand what the hype is all about, because companies like Samsung, Xiaomi, Huawei, etc., they've been releasing mid-range phones for a very long time, and it's not necessarily like they were bad. I myself used mid-range phones for a very long time until recently, and they served me well. So it seems to me a little odd as to why it's being hyped up, except except that the iPhone SE really gave something unique, I think. Yes, it has a dated design like I've mentioned earlier, but the processor and what you can do with the camera for $400, I think that's what's really giving the appeal to this mid-range segment that we've not really seen before. We've not really seen people look forward to this. And I suppose, like with most things in the tech industry, it has to do because Apple did it first. Because Apple did it first, and because Apple did it loudly, everybody's paying attention. But I think in this case, it's not just a matter of good marketing. I think it's a matter of actually making quite a decent product. So the thing that really makes the iPhone SE stand out as a mid-ranger is its processor. It shares the same processor as my iPhone 11 Pro. That's impressive for a $400 phone. But of course, it's Apple. They create their own silicon, so they can do it. They can do it without incurring additional cost. This is something which other companies cannot do. They can't afford to do that. The processor itself would cost about $200. The highest end processor, about $200. So it's not really much that a lot of companies can do to provide a high end silicon onto their mid range devices. And so with the devices like the Nord and the 4A, what you see is that they have to compromise with the processor. They have to put in a Snapdragon 765. It's by no means a bad processor, but it's not the fastest. It's not the most powerful. And so with the iPhone SE, people already know what the iPhone looks like. They might have been interested with the iPhone for a very long time. They just weren't willing to pay $1,000 for a phone. They maybe weren't even willing to pay $800 or $700. But for $100, well, that's really compelling to me. A lot of people are willing to get such a phone. If I didn't get the 11 Pro, I would have certainly gotten the iPhone SE. Just because I would like to see what an iOS device is like. And it's not really surprising that this is why there has been a lot of hype built up on this. And of course, the OnePlus Nord and the Pixel 4a, I wouldn't say they were necessarily riding on this wave of hype, but they certainly took advantage of it because a lot of people were really hyped up for the OnePlus Nord and also the Pixel 4a for different reasons. OnePlus really did a good job on marketing the OnePlus Nord, whereas the Pixel 4a has been delayed so many times that people just wanted to see it, regardless of whatever state it's in. They just want to see it. So I think it's still odd for me, taking into consideration of all these things, but yet at the same time, it sort of makes sense as well. So Lakshman, what's your take on this? I know we were discussing this a few days ago.
Right. So in terms of the mid-rangers, today more than ever, I think the mobile space is at a crossroads here because, we've got flagship devices that are priced at the highest they've ever been priced, in the thousands of dollars, And now, I think as a result of that, companies are starting to take advantage of that gap in pricing between ultra high-end devices and those low-end devices. And these mid-rangers, you're right, mid-rangers have always been around, but today more than ever, almost every single company in the mobile space today, including Apple, have a compelling mid-range lineup. That was unheard of 5 years ago. And on top of that, I think today, at least from what I've been observing, a lot of people are actually, they're quite satisfied. These are not tech people, but generally the public in general are quite satisfied with their purchase of a premium mid-range device. For instance, the best one in the market being devices like the OnePlus Nord and the iPhone SE. I think with what Apple did here was that they established a formula that worked. That was an older flagship design with new internals. So that formula worked. A lot of people enjoy that. But on the Android side of things, as you've mentioned, most other manufacturers are not as privileged as Apple because they cannot use the latest processors. Because that's just not going to work, because they don't make them in house. But what they're doing and the compromises they're making, I think, are the right compromises. And devices like Samsung's A series of phones and the OnePlus Nord, and to some extent the Pixel 4a, they make the compromises at the right, just the right balance of what to include and what not to include. So as a result, we get a device that's enough. It's not fantastic. It doesn't make you go wow, but it doesn't make you go, oh, I hate this so much. When you pick it up and you use it, you just forget about it. And I think that mindset, that idea has really made the premium mid-range devices quite high in terms of appeal. But Ben, this begs the question: do you think, with mid-ranges becoming more of a thing, do you think this will cannibalize flagship device sales, in your opinion?
Well, yes, to some degree, of course. It's no doubt that if you're going to provide, say, something like the iPhone SE, you're definitely going to hurt the sales of your iPhone 11 models. However, I think that's only true to a certain extent. I mean, there's quite a bit of economics that's going on over here, which I can't exactly get into. But suffice to say, if you have the money, and if you're sort of into buying the latest and greatest, you're not going to bother with the mid-range phones in the first place. But if you're the type of person who doesn't really care about a phone and you just want a good enough phone, you don't want a sucky phone, you don't want a phone that will ruin your experience, but you want a good enough phone, well, these mid-ranges are for you. Because these are the type of people who would never consider flagships in the first place. They were expensive to start with, and they're really, really, really expensive now. So for those type of people, the OnePlus Nord, the Pixel 4a, the iPhone SE, they all work really well for themselves. And it all depends on other factors like what kind of ecosystem do you prefer, which country do you live in, and what are the prices of those devices in the local region. So while the iPhone SE is pretty cheap in Malaysia, is pretty cheap in the US, it's ridiculously expensive in India. It's really expensive in India. It's if you the iPhone SE wouldn't be considered mid-range in India. It's really pushing towards flagship territory. And the iPhone 11 Pro is even more. It's even more so expensive. So depending on factors like that, in some places yes, in some places no. But I think by and large, the gap is large enough so that if there is any sort of cannibalization going on of other products within those particular companies, it's not going to be by much. Because there's enough differentiating factors, and as well, of course, the cost, to make sure that the cannibalizing effect is reduced as much as possible. So those are my thoughts actually on the product cannibalization of these different companies. The products that are offered by these different companies. Now, I think for those certain kinds of people who really like the mid-range phones, or rather who don't really bother about flagships, I think all three devices are very competent. While I myself cannot really I cannot find myself excited by any of those phones, honestly. But I think so for most people, it would work well for them. If you had to, if I was forced to give up my iPhone 11 Pro and I was forced to give up my Samsung S10 and choose one of these phones or two of these phones in my case, I think I'd be fine with them. I'd have a OnePlus Nord and I'd have an iPhone SE to replace both my Android and my iOS device. I think it will work pretty well. It's just in certain regards they fall a bit short, but hey, for $400, can you really expect any more?
That's quite an interesting observation. But I think what you mentioned about how the market has a significant impact when it comes to the purchasing decisions of these mid-range devices. And I like that you mentioned that, for example, the iPhone SE is still a very expensive device in countries like India. And this is because, when you look at the market, especially with Apple in India, Apple's been trying really hard to penetrate the Indian market for quite a while, and they've not they've not done it. The iPhones are still ultra premium devices over there, and even with devices like the SE, is this not enough? That's why Google stepped in, and now you got devices like the Pixel 4a. So marketing and certain economical factors and so on really have a significant role that sort of resulted in the creation and the birth of this new lineup of mid-range devices. And I think today more than ever, now that a lot of us are still the economy is not doing so well in a lot of countries. I think now the appeal factor for mid-range devices is higher. It's the highest it's ever been. And I think, as you mentioned, if you were to give up your S10 and the iPhone 11 Pro, you could still be okay with an iPhone SE and a OnePlus Nord, because I think what we are seeing, at least with the latest lineup of mid ranges, is that we are at an exciting time for mid range devices because they're making the compromises that don't matter. They in fact are focusing on the things that matter most. Things like pricing, things like the feature set, and these things matter to most people. And striking a balance between both, that's the key here. But at the same time, in terms of them cannibalizing flagship devices, and that's a really tough one because again, the flagship devices will always be the cool device. No matter which brand you're talking about, they will always be the one that will make you go wow. But with that in mind, these features that are now on the mid-range devices, just 2 or 3 years ago, they were on flagship devices. So I think for most people, at least those who are budget conscious, I think, they don't have to jump on board the latest flagship device if they really can't afford one. They should, in fact, wait it out a couple of years, and those once flagship features would trickle down to these mid-range devices. And again, it makes them a lot more compelling. So the argument that I'm presenting here is that I think it's an exciting time for mid-ranges, and going forwards, I think with the offerings that we're seeing from the likes of Samsung, Google, OnePlus, Apple, and a bunch of other manufacturers, moving forwards, I think it's going to make, I think the lineup between premium and premium mid-ranger, it's going to be a little blurry. The ultra premium devices will always stand out, but premium devices and premium mid-ranger devices, now that's a tough one, at least moving forwards in the future. What's your take, Ben?
Well, I actually quite agree with that assessment. I think so. The lines are being blurred even as we speak. But I think the lines are being blurred because there are two distinct approaches that are being taken by these companies. And the distinct approaches, let's call approach one the Apple approach, and the second approach being the Android approach. So anyone who views these three devices can immediately tell a stark difference, but they can't exactly point what's the difference. So, if I may, the difference between the Apple approach and the Android approach is this. With Apple, they don't continuously update their mid-range phones, if you notice. The first generation iPhone SE was released years ago, and they did not update or refresh the lineup until this year. And so I think we can expect Apple to do the same thing moving forward. But more importantly, if you notice, and as you've mentioned, Apple's using, well, what is considered to be an outdated design by 2020 standards, but Apple does not have to retool their machines. They don't have to take the time to design something new to make sure that it works. All the sorts of issues and processes that arise from making a new device, Apple can simply throw it out the window, use their old design, and simply upgrade the internals. And I think that'll work really well for them. Indeed, if Apple were to have made a new chassis for their phones, I think so the phone wouldn't be at $400. It would be more towards, $600, $700. At that point, it'd be pretty useless to consider the iPhone SE as some sort of a mid-range or budget option. But because they were able to reuse the design, and because the design's pretty good looking in the first place, even though it's outdated, it has that sort of traction and a effect in the market. And with the Android approach, notice all the compromises that had to be made. You can't exactly have a premium feeling chassis. You have to use a lot of plastic. You have to sacrifice on your CPU, the screen, the cameras to some regard. Something has to be sacrificed, and it's quite a bit. Now, I'm not saying that either approach is good or bad. They both have their merits. For example, if you are an Android manufacturer, it's really hard to reuse your old design because your old design doesn't necessarily look that much different to your current design. And furthermore, you don't really want the old design to start affecting your new products that badly, because that's when the cannibalization effect will really take hold, because the two devices look so similar between the mid-range and the premium that people might as well just go for the mid-range. Whereas with Apple, in Apple's case, the designs are distinctive enough. But at the same time, I don't want to be using a design that's technically 5 years old already. And by the time I buy this phone and use it for another 5 years, it will be 10 years old. Not to mention the paltry screen, which is actually in the iPhone SE, and which is its weakest point. And it may not be something that a lot of people will accept. It's not a full HD screen. It's not even a high refresh panel, which the OnePlus Nord has. So there's a give and take for all of these, but I think these are the two distinctive attempts in manufacturing a mid-range phone. And I think this trend will continue until some sort of, let's say, upheaval happens in the smartphone market, which doesn't seem to be the case. And the closest thing to that is the foldables. I think the foldables might become the new premium and ultra premium, whereas your regular phones with super thin bezels and maybe the punch hole camera or camera under the glass entirely, that might be the new mid-range, and that is something very it's something I look forward to actually if it ever happens.
You know, interesting observation. But I think it comes down to a game of compromise here. And I think with all the manufacturers out there, they're all trying to compromise on some things. Apple's compromising on design for better internals and longer support. Android's trying to find the best of both worlds, both offering a compelling modern design but they compromise a bit on the processor and the camera. So it's a game of compromises here. And as the mid-range lineup matures, it's interesting to see where they're going, because in the future, 5 years from now, when Apple, for instance, when they choose to update the iPhone SE, I think it's safe to say that the iPhone SE lineup will finally have Face ID. It'll finally be a almost bezel-less display. But at that time, that's when the distinction between premium mid-range and premium device, that's where we have to really start to evaluate things. And as you mentioned, I think you're right. In 5 to 6 years, the ultra premium devices, there'll be all sorts of foldables, and these premium mid rangers will look like the ultra premium devices we have now today, and that's not a bad thing, because we need to have the distinction. We I don't think companies would want cannibalization. That's not what we want, but generally making the right sacrifices matters. And the mid-range lineup has never been a more compelling option than it is today. And moving forwards, it is an exciting time for mobile devices. In terms of mobile phone innovation, I think we've already hit a plateau, and I think the next step is foldables and whatnot. But with the mid-range devices, with the prices we're going to pay and for what we're going to get, that's interesting. I think that would be something to keep an eye out, at least for the mobile industry moving forwards. And now with major manufacturers like Apple, who for the longest time have never had a mid-range device. Today the iPhone SE is one of their best-selling devices. I think it's interesting. And moving forwards, it's who knows where this lineup will go. So yeah, that's about it for the mid ranges, Ben. And how would you sum it up? How would you sum up premium mid ranges moving forwards?
Well, in short, as you've mentioned, it's going to be the sort of compromises that we've already expect. But again, that's something that is not much of a trouble for a lot of people. I believe that the two approaches will continue in the same sort of trajectory. I don't think Android manufacturers have the capability. I don't think they have the capability, nor do they necessarily have the options to do what Apple's doing. But I think that's okay. I think that's the sort of variety that we need. And just like in the car industry, where, for example, the Mercedes S-Class, the new features that are in the S-Class, it always trickles down to the low-end cars. So right now, even relatively cheaper cars have the features of what the S-Class had many, many years ago, and I think it's no different here. I think that Face ID may eventually show up on the iPhone SE third generation. I'm looking forward to that. And I'm hoping to see the foldables dominate the ultra premium / premium market, so that the current devices which occupy that space now get to go down to the mid-range market, the mid-range segment, the budget segment, and hey, it's a win-win for everybody. I think that's a fantastic it's a fantastic few years to look forward to, if you're not the type of person to really care about flagships. And frankly speaking, year by year, I find flagships to be less and less compelling. So I think that might be the sort of thing that I'm looking for eventually. So let us know what you think, ladies and gentlemen. If, for example, I sounded a bit odd today, I'm very sorry. I'm starting to be a bit ill. Hopefully, I'll get better soon. Let us know what you think about the news for the past week or so. So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to the Silicon Syndicate. Thank you, and until next time.